Greetings and welcome to this special episode where I'm going to give a debrief of the Campout 2022 event that took place last weekend over the course of 4 days and 4 nights of co-creation. Campout felt like the beginning of a new chapter. It felt the beginning of something new. We spent 4 days together on Fernhill Farm down in the Mendips, exploring different modes of community, different forms of co-creation, collaboration. It was a celebration of our freedoms. It was an event that intertwined personal and social change through a series of talks, panels, and experiences. And it was really evident over the course of the 4 days that people are really ready to step up and make a difference in the world around them, whilst amplifying the heart-centered human qualities that have been woefully absent within our political and economic structures. This event was put together by 3 different organizations: Inspire, Campout Convention, and Elevate, who ran the Sunday sessions. And I want to share some of the takeaways from the event in this short broadcast. So I longed for an experience like this for the last couple of years, really through lockdowns, COVID, the pandemic response. We had the opportunity to get together through protests and marches and rallies. And yes, since the freedoms have returned to us, we've had the opportunity to convene through events and such and different ways of connecting. But Campout was a deliberate co-creation, a collaboration, really exploring the key themes of our time with the kind of guiding idea that the system is broken, that we are facing systemic challenges, we are witnessing cultural and social vulnerabilities, and that something has to change. And that the ethos of the event was really about how do we model the change that we want to see in the world over the course of these 4 days. So it wasn't a strategy weekend where we get together and explore the concrete actions and game plans that we want to unfold, but rather it was an experiment in how we can come together, collaborate, and connect. And having 3 different communities come together who have walked different paths over the last couple of years, there was certainly some commonalities, but having communities come together that have different backgrounds, experiences, different views on what's gone on before us the last couple of years and wider social political ideals was fascinating to see how those conversations can emerge around the campfire, if you will, when the conditions are set for collaboration and co-creation. So the event began on Friday night with a kind of opening circle where the participants joined us to kind of understand what was planned over the course of the four days. And as I mentioned, we blended personal transformation with social change, looking at everything from the issues that have stemmed from the pandemic to the political challenges that we're facing, but really also looking at our own role, our own responsibilities in creating change that we're looking for, but also our own responsibilities in creating the problem. And the opening session really set the context for the idea that over the course of the event that you're here to co-create the event with us. It's not that we've got a series of speakers and facilitators who are here to deliver the experience. We are all responsible for the experience that we want to create at the event. So the idea was that we bring the experience that we want to experience. We bring the event that we want to experience. And what I liked most about that ideal is it really set the scene for co-creation. It set the scene for people participating over the course of the weekend, working together collaboratively to create the experience. But also, if you apply that more broadly to the challenges that we're facing in the world, bringing the experience into the world that you want to create, it really gives you that personal responsibility to take direct action on the things that you are dissatisfied with, either in your own personal life or in the world around you. And it's amazing what can happen when people come together. And there's this idea that the ideal number of people to work together collaboratively in community is around 150. It's reflective of what's called the Dunbar number. Some of my podcast guests have made this connection before. And whilst there were several hundred people at the event, The adult space, the horseshoe barn that Campfire Convention and Elevate collaborated on over the course of the 4 days, had a maximum capacity over that time of around 100 to 150. So we operated within that kind of ideal realm. And just from the opening session, where people set their intention, their frustrations are what they'd seen in the world, but their intent to really be part of the solution was really quite captivating to hear. And so many people had traveled to be part of the event by themselves, but within hours of being on site, people no longer felt alone. And for a lot of people over the last few years, they felt alone, even if they're connected through ideas and different communities online. It's very different from feeling part of something in a physical environment. So it was amazing to see how quickly that synergy was created amongst people from all walks of life and different backgrounds, and people who had traveled from all over, not only the UK, but as far afield as Germany, to join us for the 4 days. And over the course of the 4 days, there was talks, debates, discussions that took place in the kind of formal setting of the sessions that were delivered by our facilitators and our speakers. But the conversations that continued around the campfire were incredible to witness. The kind of communal space where we had our meals, the conversation over food was just so vibrant. And whilst there's lots of ideas exchanged around how we can actually go about creating change in the world, and there was some really fascinating sessions on social change, political change, with Julianne Sadiq and Indra Adnam over the course of Saturday and Sunday, which really provided food for thought around how we can create parallel structures, parallel polis, how we can actually create change outside of the political environment, as well as influencing the political environment, how we can influence the global structures. There was some really insightful and well thought through discussion. But what struck me the most is the standard of the human qualities that we're really looking for in the world around us. And as much as we can disagree with the policies that are put forth by national leaders and global policymakers or corporate elitists that influence policy, what we had a shared understanding around was the absence of the human qualities within our political space, within the leaders who are supposed to be representing the interests of the people on the planet. Yet what was cultivated over those 4 days was a real renaissance of those human qualities that we want to see, and was, of course, during the course of those experiences, people are asking, what can we do? And it's important we do ask what we can do. There is magic to cultivating the energy that you wish to see in the world, the kind of atmosphere, the culture, if you will, because in the course of 4 days, you can really create a microcosm of culture that can expand out into the world when you take that energy home with you. And people really connected with the heart as well as the mind over the course of the 3 or 4 days. It was really a journey of mind, body, and soul. Everything from morning breathwork sessions, conscious dance to get people in the zone, through to the discussions and the meditation, the contemplation, the introspection, as well as the talks and debates, really created the sense of community, connection, collaboration. And these are all essential tools that we need to bring to the work that needs to be done in the outer world. And the event manifesto on the Friday night was very clear, the message that there is work to be done, but there is also work to be done on ourselves, because the reality is broken people create broken systems. And it's very evident that there are broken people within the context of our broken systems, and that we're in this perpetual loop. And there's an intrinsic relationship between the human condition and the systems that we operate within, and they're directly interconnected. And if we expect that bringing the same trauma, the same collective energies that are latent within all of us into systemic change, then it's not going to be long before we repeat the same patterns. So having the space to really examine and have that introspection as well as explore modes of change was vital, because we end up in this culture, which I've described before as the kind of whack-a-mole culture, where there's always this perpetual sense of urgency, like the house is on fire. And to some, that is a reality. And I've lived through that reality for the last couple of years. But what's really interesting when you take yourself out of that sense of house being on fire, you can almost visualize this constant firefighting, tackling individual policy issues, and you start to recognize that the hose is on, but the fire is out. And actually, that's not to say that there aren't fires burning that need to be tackled, but when we actually take the time out to reflect on the depth and the complexity of the systemic issues, we realize that if we stay in this fight or flight, urgent action environment, we're always just tackling what's in front of us, and we're not actually getting to the depth of what's required in order to create change. Nor are we being role model leaders, nor are we modeling the change in the world we want to see. We're just throwing more anger and frustration out into the world. Now, anger and frustration are great compelling forces. In fact, this morning was my first day back in office. I took last week off, just completely disconnected from the world. Campout was a full-on experience. I was exhausted. I camped, for the first time in 10 years, and didn't get much sleep, and worked my tail off over the course of the 4 days and 4 nights to make sure we had a great experience. So I was exhausted at the end of the event, and the last 2 years and such have been really intense, and I've not really had much holiday time to kind of rejuvenate. So it was vital that I took that time to rejuvenate last week. But this morning, getting back into action, I went into the gym this morning for the first time in a couple of weeks, put on my kind of anarchic punk rock heavy music to get myself in the zone, and use that opportunity to kind of take out the tension that I was feeling in my body through the weights that I was throwing around. Not literally throwing around, but you get my point. But I used that opportunity to really reconnect with the frustration and anger that I'd felt, because I truly, over the last week, had this kind of blissful, relaxing experience, reconnected with that kind of heart-centered culture within the Campout context, which I truly believe is what's necessary in the world to actually evolve our consciousness and to actually break beyond, go beyond the systems and structures that we currently experience, which are driven by a very different energy source within ourselves: fear, greed, scarcity. In order to transcend that, we have to transcend that energy within ourselves. But this morning, I wanted to reconnect with that frustration, and the music set the context, the gym session set the context, and I really felt a sense of grief for what had gone on in the last couple of years, because so many people had missed out on so much. Life is short and it's precious. I'm coming up to my 40th birthday next year. And someone said to me the average age, and this is true, the average age of death in the United Kingdom is around 82 years old, which means that on that basis, you've got an average, you likely got around 42 summers left of your life. Which means I'm more than likely approaching halfway. And actually, the data also shows that the next 15 years of my life will be the most, where I'm most in my prime, before the body starts to go into kind of decay. Not to get depressing. That's why I go to the gym and eat what I eat to prolong the experience. But my point is this: life is short, and actually we want to make sure that our experience of this life is enriched and fulfilling. And therefore, in order to create that change in the world we wish to see, we have to become that change. We have to create the energy that we want to experience in the world, and that begins with us. We so much of the time we abdicate our responsibility and we give away our energy, but we become disempowered by having this victim culture of blame. And whilst it's very easy to do that in anger and frustration, we have to recognize we have a role to play in that, and everything is cause and effect, and it's an exchange. And over the recent decades, political participation has reached its lowest point. And at the same time, corporations have got more power over politics than ever before in history. Yet here we are, diminishing our own responsibility. Where is the public square? Where is the space to discuss things in open debate? We have to create these things. We have to take responsibility. It's very easy to shift blame and apportion the fault of the situation that we find ourselves into something outside of ourselves. And that's not to say that there is no external force that's creating this problem, but we have to also recognize the internal force within ourselves to actually affect change. So Campout was a really great experience to really connect with that inner force and to connect with that heart-centered desire to proliferate a different sense of energy and consciousness out into the world. But my workout this morning was back into that sense of injustice, frustration, anger. But I used that workout to transmute that energy into positive focus, thinking, okay, well, how do we move forward from here? How do we take that energy that was created over the space of 4 days, where complete strangers in most cases came together over the course of 4 days and 4 nights to create a beautiful experience that is reflective of the experience we want to witness in the world? And I want to share some of the feedback that I've taken comprehensive notes on from some of the participants who joined us for that 4-day experience, because to me, these are the things that we want to see in the world, and it's evident over the course of those 4 days that we have the power to create it. Yes, there are barriers. Yes, there are challenges. We're very real about that. The session that we had with Indra Adnan, my recent podcast guest on social change, political change, parallel polis, really was reflective of that. We looked at situations in history whereby progress had been made and in challenging some of the structures, but how things bounce back. So there's very real challenges that we have to overcome. But we have to fortify ourselves from within. We have to create the energy and consciousness within ourselves that we want to create in the world around us. Otherwise, as I mentioned, we repeat the same patterns. So there were some really interesting discussions around creating parallel polis, and this idea of parallel polis is around how we can create parallel structures that, in one sense, enable us to build new models of society, whether that's healthcare, whether that's media, alternative media, whether that's education. There are ways to test and prototype different ways of new models. But we have to think about the thinking that underpins these things. We have to think about the intention that goes into these things, because if we don't think about these things up front, this is where the gateway to corruption, before it's even begun, is wide open. So parallel policy is an interesting discussion because there are some interesting political parties and political models that have emerged in Europe, in Scandinavia, that we discussed about at the event that could actually be applicable here, but there's some unique barriers in the United Kingdom. Scotland, interestingly, is an interesting opportunity politically because of the way the political system is different from in England. But we need to be thinking about these conversations about how we actually create political change. And this is one of the structural conversations that we had over the course of Campout, as well as looking at what are the most effective modes of social change, what are the most effective forms of structural and systemic reform. There was this discussion around acupuncture points, which is around, how do you find the pressure points, i.e. how do you find the single points of interaction that can create the greatest difference, which I thought was a really fascinating discussion, in the multitude of ways that we can affect change, looking at those points of interaction that can actually move the needle, so to speak. So we had this fascinating conversation where we actually examined the possibilities that are available to us, but also looking at what are some of the real challenges, because we live in a global world right now, which means that even if you're able to create national change, say a new political party emerged that actually got a stronghold, that actually created progress, the reality is you're going to come up, even if you get into power, you're still going to come up against the global machine. So whilst we have the opportunities on a local, regional, national basis to affect political change, we still have to be aware of the global machine that's out there. And therefore, even if we think purely locally on this, which I think is part of the solution, we also have to be mindful of how other people are thinking locally in their own territories, so that we can actually break down some of those global barriers, as well as the national challenges, the regional challenges that stand in the way of actually creating a parallel polis or a different political system or a different economic system. It's fascinating to look at those intrinsic relationships, and to have people in the room that could comment on those intrinsic relationships between local, regional, national, international was truly thought-provoking. So that's kind of some of the structural pieces that came through this. There's a lot more that I could say on the structural pieces, but we're going to have a lot more content on this on the podcast around structural change, because as I'll come to talk about, the focus following Campout is actually about creating political change. And I do believe the power is in our hands to create political change in the United Kingdom, also worldwide. But my focus, being a resident of the United Kingdom, is to influence change here. And we've got this summer months coming up where Sunak and Truss are battling it out for the position of Prime Minister. But regardless of your political ideologies, most people would agree that at least everyone at the event had, who I think is reflective of our wider community, has a belief that neither of those individuals are going to bring about any form of systemic change, and it was just going to see more of the same. So there has to be a conversation over the course of the coming months about how we create political transformation. And I truly believe that we can see political transformation outside of the realms of politics itself, certainly outside of the realms of party politics. Many of the limitations, many of the old world limitations are created by party politics. And I think there is an opportunity for us to transcend that. We asked the question, how many people feel politically homeless? And, nearly everyone in the room raised their hands. And we had a private conversation on Sunday with the wider community, and that we asked the same question. And again, consensus is, regardless of your prior political ideologies, we've got people in the Elevate community that are long-standing from the left or the right, the center. We've got a politically diverse community base, which is fantastic because, part of the problem is this illusion of separation that comes through the kind of party lines. And, we're constantly fighting the left to the right. And it's fantastic to be amongst people who, despite their previous political allegiances, are coming together, feeling politically homeless and actually looking things outside of party politics. I think a lot of the solutions come outside of the traditional idea of the left and right, and how we break through that polarization and divide is really fascinating, because when you actually chunk it down to the core issues that we're tackling, there's a common sense approach to realizing that these issues that we're facing are totally transcendent of political lines. It's only when we get into the political ideologies that things start to break down. So it's fascinating to see at Campout a diverse group of people who come from different political backgrounds, some who have historically been ardent left and others have been ardent right, coming together and actually finding common ground, finding agreement over the issues that we're trying to tackle. And not only that, actually collaborating and recognizing the strengths of those prior political polarities. Polarities in many ways we can utilize to our strengths if we don't allow them to divide us. So, some of the spirit of the event that came through, there was this attitude of kindness, co-creation, collaboration, inner and outer connection, remembrance of who we really are on the deeper intrinsic level, a sense of being alive, this aliveness that's been lacking for the last few years, this idea of being able to give and pay it forward, creating the space and time for bigger thinking, bigger dreams, stronger dreams, having real intentionality around how we live our lives in the world that we want to create, understanding the balance between the masculine and feminine, understanding the balance between the East and the West, understanding the balance between the left and the right, understanding these polarities, dancing these polarities, creating almost like a flirtatious energy around things that normally divide us. The real strong atmosphere of heart and love and generosity and sharing and kindness and compassion and presence that came through from the event. These are the things that people have been craving. These are the things that people have been lacking. And we're able to tap really into these things at the event. And what that creates is this ability to create. So it creates the ability to go beyond our differences. It creates the opportunity to be able to co-create and to collaborate despite our differences. And in fact, in harmony with our differences. We saw ideas turning into action. We saw spontaneous action, acts of service, abundance. There's this real energy that was created over this four and a half days that I call it creative anarchy. It represents both the beauty of our individuality as well as this common ground that can come from working together as part of a co-creation or a collaboration, a real sense of kind of gathering of the tribes, people called together because of what's going on in the world around us, and different people having different priorities, whether it's the sacrifice of our freedom or whether it's seeing the destruction of our lands or whether it's seeing the erosion of political democracy. The people came there for different reasons, but we all came away with a sense of unified opportunity to work together to actually affect change, connecting that inner change with outer change, recognizing the need to anticipate the problems and to expect the unexpected, to treat people as human beings, to treat people as though we'd want to be treated ourselves, recognizing the rich tapestry of our lives, being not just being open-minded and actually going beyond the idea of open-minded to actually becoming open-hearted, because being open-minded is one thing, but we're still going to have differences and different perspectives. But if we have an open heart and we can connect on a different level, then we can really start to make a difference. And then we went beyond the idea of being open-minded to open-hearted to actually just open to experience, open not only to just different points of view, but different people from different backgrounds and different experiences, different ways of operating, different ways of co-creating, different ways of living, and removing the barriers to actually embracing new ideas is just so powerful. Removing the barriers that are often falsely created by narratives that are outside of our control, narratives that are propagated deliberately to divide us. So breaking beyond these in this confines of an event space was really powerful, reminding ourselves that it's important to have fun, to live lightly, to reconnect with joy and play, and actually find that joy and play in the pursuit of the things that we're trying to change, rather than feeling that tension, that anxiety all the time. Whilst that tension and anxiety can be a catalyst, how we can actually get into flow, how we can get into that kind of joyful living, and actually find a greater balance between the heart and the mind, connecting with wisdom, connecting with the emergent as well as the wisdom of the ages. And ultimately, really, my primary takeaway from Campout was about the importance about creating the conditions for change, to creating the conditions for the experience that you wish to create, because what was experienced in the beautiful reflections that have come from the participants of that event, and there's been so much wonderful feedback, was that it's the conditions of the game, it's the way we set up the event that enabled that to then unfold. So what we really have to think about if we want to create systemic change is the conditions of the world right now, and whether the conditions that are latent within our current systems are conducive to the change we want to see, or whether we need to reevaluate our virtues, our values, reevaluate our principles, because the conditions were set by those principles, those intentions, and those virtues that were brought to that event, as well as the catalysts through the conversation starters, the facilitation, etc., that actually brought those conditions to life. But to me, there's lots of thought-provoking insights that can come from an event like this in a container of a number of days with a select number of people. But it's just incredible what was achieved, the co-creation over those 4 days within the context of an event, how that can then be replicated in local communities, how it can be carried forward into a movement, how it can be expanded. Because what was evident over the course of those 4 days is, yes, people had come there to connect and to collaborate and co-create. It came from a sense of frustration of what's going on in the world, but it came with a real desire and commitment to be part of the solution. It's very easy to be a keyboard warrior, someone who's passively observing on the sidelines. And there are millions of people in the world right now doing that. And, maybe we all start there, but actually now it's about helping to go beyond becoming awake to the issues of the world, to becoming empowered and then active participants in change. To me, this is where the power of these events really lie, is in its bringing people together who are open-minded, yes, but open-hearted, open to new experiences and new ideas. But then lighting the metaphorical fire, campfire convention, elevate, camp out, the fire was a central component of this. The evening discussions around the campfire was so key to creating this atmosphere. Respectful disagreements around the fire is very different to the kind of heated the Twitterati. And I was certain that there are people at the event who have been my critics over the last couple of years. And that's I didn't have the moment to meet directly with a critic, but I just had a sense that we were in conversation in a different environment where we're able to have respectful discussion and respectful disagreements. But this idea that we go from being awake to empowered, which comes from an inner sense of certainty, an inner sense of power, that we are able to affect change in our own lives and lives around us. And when we connect that with a sense of love and a sense of heart and human qualities that I've described, that were really, really visceral at this event, when we actually take that into the world and we become active participants in change, not only we do so with greater creativity, the creative anarchy, if you will, but with a real heart center, with a real uh, deep sense of human quality that is woefully lacking within our current systems and structures, then we can really make a difference. We can do so in a way despite our differences and find ways that involve everyone, because if you look at across party political lines, you're always going to end up in a, any referendum is going to end up in divide, which never is going to serve the whole. So we need to find a way to go beyond our differences and actually collaborate. And in this unique environment, we're able to do that and come to a shared understanding of different problems that perhaps we didn't have shared understandings of prior to the event, because we weren't there just to talk about COVID. In fact, COVID and vaccines and all those things were barely part of the conversation. We really looked at the root structural elements that underpin the surface level issues that we've experienced and we do continue to experience on a more visceral sense. So I hope that we have the opportunity to create more experiences like this, both virtually and physically, like we had at Campout, where we can get people engaged in collaboration, because it really is a test ground for how we can collaborate in our communities, both in the physical world, in our localized communities, regionally, where I do think there's an incredible opportunity for change. This idea that liberty comes with the requirement of self-governance has kind of fallen by the wayside in the recent years and decades. The ability to self-govern, the ability to affect change on a localized level is within our hands. We just need to become active participant in change. And I think that's where our greatest opportunity lies. So going forward, we're going to have a number of conversations on the podcast around this, about how we can create political change, how we can create systemic change. The idea of a parallel polis is a really interesting one. There was a real interesting discussion around how we create external change whilst continuing to bring people together within that change, so we don't alienate. We don't, the idea when we have conversations around parallel communities and structures, often there's this almost utopian ideal that we're going to create this micro community outside of the system that's going to be self-organizing and separate from the rest of the world. The real crux of the conversation at Campout showed that people don't want to feel that disconnect. They don't want to widen the separation, but they do want to find modes of exploring new ways of living, new ways of creating, new ways of collaborating, almost in an entrepreneurial kind of prototype sense, minimum viable product, minimum viable government, if you will, that enables us to test new ideas that can then be scaled into a wider society and can actually challenge the incumbent. So there's some really interesting avenues to explore. But from my point of view, on a personal level, as these two politicians, Sunak and Truss, get out into the communities over the next few months, they're going to be getting out there trying to win the votes of the Conservative Party members. Right now, there's about, think about this. The decision of who will become prime minister is in the hands of around 180,000, between 180,000 and 220,000 people who are the existing Conservative Party members. Yet we have a population of 69 million, 68, 69 million. So the decisions, once again, are in the hands of the few. And we know that there's wider influences at play here than more than that goes to the vote. But putting that aside, whoever wins the race, what change are they really going to bring? The power to create change is really in our hands. And I believe community by community, locality by locality, region by region, we can create change. But we can't just do this in isolation. We have to do this, working together to collaborate. We have to connect with other nations, because we will inevitably come up against the global elite, the global systems, the global structures, as we've viscerally experienced during the course of the pandemic. So these community, this evolution of community on a local and regional basis needs to be a global challenge as well, whereby we're sharing ideas across borders, because otherwise those global systems will stand in our way. But it certainly, to me, begins with what we can do in our own nation here, what we can do on our own locality, what we can do in our own region. So my plan is, over the course of August and September, when Truss and Sunak are out there trying to win the hearts and minds of the voters, I'm going to be out there with our team. I'm going to be out there with other organizations. We're going to be out there in the community with our communities, talking about how we can take control of our destiny, how we can actually create political transformation for all of those people out there right now who feel politically homeless and alienated by the status quo. Those are the people. You are the people that we want to cut and connect with, because together we can affect change. We can affect change on a localized basis. We can solve the many challenges that we're now facing, whether it's the healthcare crisis, record hospital waiting lists, whether it's the obesity challenge, whether it's conflict in our communities, whether it's global warfare, whether it's the cost of living crisis, whether it's localized ecological challenges. The power is in our hands to affect these issues. We cannot wait for some political leader or institution to solve the problems for us. For too long, people have been disconnected from the world and the society that they live. You know, the public square, the town square, of days of old, where people would come together to discuss the challenges of the local communities, have died. It's our opportunity to bring these to the forefront. It's our opportunities to become empowered and awakened to the issues that we're facing, but active participants and active co-creators in change. What I experienced at Campout 2022 was a microcosm. It shows that when we work in communities, when we collaborate, we connect, and we celebrate together, we can affect change. We can create creative anarchy, and we can create political, social, economic transformation. And that power is in our hands. The moment we step from becoming a passive observer of the challenges of our world to becoming active participants, that's when we claim our power to affect change. So it's our goal to get out in the communities in the UK over the coming months and inspire people to become active participants in change, to share ideas, to share different ways that things can be tackled, to share creative and inspirational ways to tackle problems amongst ourselves, and to actually enable people and empower people to get out there and make a difference in their communities. So we're looking to work with a whole host of different people as we get out there. Our focus over this coming months, in tandem with the political conversation, is really to bring that political conversation to a new level, to bring politics away from party politics and into our homes, to bring politics into a different understanding of how politics plays out in our day-to-day lives, to develop a sense of political awareness, to develop a sense of political consciousness, and to recognize that politics is simply a reflection of how we live our lives, and that we have the power to create our own destiny, to forge our own path ahead from here. So I'm looking forward to arranging the tour. We're going to get out there with a number of different partners in arranging these conversations. But we're really looking to speak to the politically disillusioned, the politically disenfranchised, those of you who feel that the current system is broken, and that there is a different way forward, and that there is a way that when we work in our communities, we can actually affect change, and not only working within our localized communities, but actually connecting and sharing with other communities locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Because it's going to take an international effort to overcome the international problems that we're facing right now. You know, we've talked extensively about the different challenges within the context of the pandemic, and we recognize the interconnection between the policies that flowed across borders, the kind of almost lockstep approach to policy. We recognize the global challenges that we face. So whilst localization in one hand is part of the solution, it's also having what Indra calls cosmo-localism. It's about working on a local regional basis whilst also connecting to the wider systems outside of our own locality. So it's an exciting time to be alive. It truly is. It might feel deeply challenging, but with the right mindset, with the right heart set, the right spirit and consciousness, we can actually affect, not only activate something within ourselves that gives us the power to step forward and create change, but we can actually bring a new energy and a new consciousness into the world, whilst also looking at how we address the human condition that repeatedly perpetuates the patterns we're seeing, whilst addressing the systemic issues that we are facing, the legacy issues, the present moment issues, and the cultural fragility. The power is in our hand to create change when we move from being passive observers to active participants in change. So that's my invitation to you, is to join us on this path, this political movement, if you will. People keep asking me, am I going to start a political party? Maybe one day. Let's see how this thing goes. But the answer to me is in our hands. It's in our communities. It's a political movement. It's creating a political movement that affects change. It's not only creating change in our local communities, but it's imparting pressure on the political system to create the required transformation that will be necessary in order to really affect change. So it's my invitation to you to be part of our movement. I invite you to join our Elevate network. It's our change-making community. We're going to go through lots of different changes, having had time to reflect over the last few weeks on the event itself. It's very clear the direction that we need to take in order to affect change around us. So if you're not yet a member of our Elevate network, it's in its infancy. We've got over 5,000 members at this moment in time. But people like you and I who are committed to creating change, active participants in change, you're willing to step up and make a difference in the world around you. If you're looking for a place to connect with other like-minded, like-hearted people, come and find us at weareelevate.org. We have people from we're not a left wing, right wing, we are politically diverse. We come from different backgrounds, different experiences. Whilst many of us have come here for the challenges we've witnessed through the pandemic and the response to the COVID-19, our community is growing, and we're bringing a whole different range of issues to the table that we can affect change on. We can bring to the table. We will need focus, of course, but it's a place where we can have the discussions around what's most important and how we actually bring about that change. And there is enough of us out there to affect change. It doesn't take the whole population, fortunately, to affect change. It takes a small portion of us who are willing to go the course and affect to take the action necessary to actually instigate change. And it's my belief that there's enough of us out there right now, if activated, that we can create powerful and enduring systemic change. So do come and join us at the Elevate Network, and you'll see what we have planned. We have our first community call of the month on Wednesday night this week, 8 p.m. UK time, where I'll be debriefing further on our journey to date on the Elevate Network and where we intend to go next, and further details around the plan to get out in the UK. So come and see us at the Elevate Network, and let's be part of the conversation and part of the change together. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the share button, please. We're experiencing ridiculous amounts of censorship right now, and I can imagine it's only going to get worse because we're out there pushing on the edges of the system and the status quo. And it seems that the powers and the incumbent media systems don't really like it when we go against those finely defined edges. So please help us to share this. We're currently suppressed in a big way on Facebook. We're okay on YouTube at the moment, but it doesn't take much these days to trigger a ban. So please do help us share, and together we can create change. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's great. It's a pleasure to be back. I look forward to seeing you soon.